At the family memorial service of my in-laws, my husband's sister who loves him so much said, "Oh, I can't believe that. Hendrix married such an ugly girl. I hate it. She insults me every time we meet." When she saw this, my mother-in-law chimed in instead of stopping her. "Ha ha ha. You're a bit too honest." My grandmother-in-law, who had been silent until then, asked, "Who are you saying that to?" A surprising reprimand was delivered. "I am Azalea Turner and I'm 30 years old. I'm just an ordinary person who can be found anywhere. I'm not particularly good-looking, and I don't have any outstanding talents. After graduating from college, I joined an insurance company, leading a mediocre and uneventful employee life. I quit my job when I got married, and I'm working part-time now. I'm still living an ordinary life. My husband, Hendrix, who is 2 years younger than me, is an office worker at a regular company. We met when I was still working at the insurance company. One evening, while having drinks at a bar with some friends from my school days after work, my husband and his colleagues happened to come to the same bar. They were junior employees from the company where one of my friends worked, so we decided to drink together. I've never been shy around people, and always have a smile for everyone, so I quickly hit it off with my husband and his colleagues. My only strength is this smile and my friendly personality. I felt a similar wavelength with my husband, who was also cheerful and friendly, and our conversation was lively. I thought it would be wonderful to be in a relationship with someone like him with whom I get along so well. But I probably wouldn't even be noticed, since I'm older and chubby, let alone dating someone as fantastic as him is just a far-fetched dream, and it's absolutely impossible. Since I rarely even have a chance to talk to someone like him, I should consider it a win just to have met and had a conversation with him today. However, a few days later, I received a message from my friend. "Hendrix seems to like you." I became from his drinking buddy to his girlfriend, and we got married 3 years ago. Now we live in a rental apartment and are working hard to save money for our future home. Even after we got married, my husband remained gentle and kind, always providing laughter and creating a harmonious atmosphere. This personality seems to be something he inherited from his father, who passed away just before my husband started working. I also have a similar personality, so our married life was filled with kindness and smiles every day. Every now and then, without any particular reason, we'd mutter how lucky we were to have found each other, and we'd look at each other and say, "I'm so happy." We were truly leading a peaceful life. However, my husband's sister and mother had completely opposite personalities. According to them, they are refreshingly straightforward, but it's just that they are insensitive. They mistakenly think that saying whatever they want is being straightforward. I found these two, who had no reservations, incredibly difficult to get along with. Since my in-laws' house is about an hour's drive from our home, I usually didn't have to see them very often, which was a relief. But when we visited for family events, I couldn't avoid them. They'd make fun of my appearance and put me through some truly unpleasant experiences. At times, my husband would step in, but these two never seemed to listen to anyone. They would mock me to my face, regardless of who was around. My husband's grandmother also lives with them in my in-laws' house. She's the complete opposite of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, extremely quiet and unsociable. Unlike them, she doesn't say anything particularly negative about me, but I couldn't tell whether she liked me or not, or what she was thinking. She just looked at me with cold eyes, so I found her difficult to handle as well. One day, I received a call from my mother-in-law, telling me that my father-in-law's 7th memorial service was approaching, and I was asked to come to the family home early in the morning. As the eldest son's wife, I was always expected to go to my in-laws' house in the morning to help with the memorial service preparations. Just the thought of facing those thoughtless words from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, as well as my grandmother-in-law's icy gaze, weighed heavily on me. My husband is considerate of me and says that he can go to the memorial service by himself, but I have no idea what they might say to me in the future if I didn't go. I don't want to make things more unpleasant than they already are, so I always go to my in-laws' house to help out. I am by no means skilled nor efficient. I'm more on the clumsy side, and I'm well aware of it. That's why I've always tried my best to help on occasions like this, to earn recognition from my in-laws. I believed that if I worked hard, they would eventually accept me and stop making hurtful comments. My husband is a peaceful person and by nature does not like to argue or fight. He always has a pained expression on his face whenever I'm criticized, making it clear how he feels. I don't want to add to his worries, so I'm determined to be accepted as the eldest son's wife as soon as possible. When I told him that, even if they say something to me, I'll just laugh it off like I always do, so I'll be fine. While smiling, he said he loved me because I always try my best. But he also told me to make sure not to push myself too hard, and that I don't need to go through a hard time on my own. When I reassured him that I understood, he responded by promising to buy my favorite tart on his way home from work as a reward the next day while caressing my head. When I said I love him because he is such a kind husband, he smiled shyly while scratching his head. On the day of the memorial service, my husband and I arrived early at my in-laws' house. My husband's grandmother was waiting us at the front door. Feeling nervous by my husband's side, I greeted her, "Long time no see," but my grandmother-in-law didn't respond nor smile as usual. She made a gesture, as if to say, "Hurry up and go inside to help with the preparations," and then disappeared into the house. My husband and I exchanged glances, sharing a wry smile, and shrugged our shoulders. He told me in a quiet voice good luck and gave me a small thumbs up to encourage me, before I hurriedly followed my grandmother-in-law. Inside the room, they had removed the big shelf, which was dividing the space into two parts, to create a bigger seating area for the memorial service. When my mother-in-law and sister-in-law saw my face, they simply greeted me with a half-hearted welcome and exchanged meaningful smirks as usual. I didn't want to engage in unnecessary conversations that might lead to confrontation, so I responded with a polite "long time no see," and immediately started helping with the preparations. Then, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law both stopped working and said, "Shall we ask her to do the rest?" They sat down and started to relax. And then, they watched from a distance, taunting me by calling me slow and clumsy as I diligently prepared everything. They laughed and jeered, telling me I needed to work faster, or else the day would end before I finished. Especially my sister-in-law, Bianca, who loves her older brother, my husband, holds a strong grudge against me for taking her brother away. Her snide remarks and insults are far more spiteful than my mother-in-law's. As soon as my husband appeared, Bianca quickly changed her tone and attitude, turning into a sweet and cute sister. The speed of her transformation was truly astonishing. She showed affection to my husband in an ostentatious manner, talking in a sweet voice that made me feel sick. Watching her, I felt an overwhelming sense of exhaustion building up inside me. Before long, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, claiming it was a rare family gathering, roped my husband into their circle, passing off the preparations to me, and stopped preparing for the memorial service completely. But there was no point in me voicing my opinion. I decided to ignore them and continued with the preparations. determined to get them done as quickly as possible. As I neared the end of my preparations, I looked up and saw my grandmother-in-law's back through the crack of the door. She was sitting alone in front of my father-in-law's memorial portrait. Seeing her like that, I couldn't help but wonder how much grief a parent feels when they lose a child. Feeling a deep sense of empathy, I quietly placed 2 cups of tea beside her. She noticed it, looked at me without changing her expression, and then silently placed one of the cups in front of the memorial portrait. I think I understood how she was feeling. When I finished the preparations, relatives began to arrive at my in-laws' house one after the other. My husband and I stood at the entrance, welcoming each relative with greetings and expressions of gratitude. Ideally, my mother-in-law should also be greeting them, but instead, she and my sister-in-law were completely indifferent, sitting in a room different from the one for the memorial service, watching TV. I felt sorry for the concerned relatives, who wondered if they were not feeling well. I went to encourage my mother-in-law to greet the guests, but she replied that she'd see them later, so there was no need to greet them now. My husband was also appalled by his mother and sister's lack of manners and told me not to worry about them, so I decided not to say anything anymore. When the guests, who had received invitations, had nearly all arrived, and the chairs I prepared were almost filled, the priest has also arrived. My husband and I, along with my grandmother-in-law, my mother-in-law who has finally came to the room, and sister-in-law, made our way to the family seating area. My father-in-law's 7th memorial service has started. Throughout the service, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's lack of manners became more evident. Conversations and laughter could be heard throughout the service, so much so that it garnered the attention of the relatives. I'm sure the priest also found it disturbing. I looked at my grandmother-in-law, who was sitting quietly in front of the memorial portrait earlier, wondering what she was thinking about this situation, but she remained silent with her eyes closed. Although I didn't particularly get along with her, I couldn't help but feel sympathy for her, imagining what she might be feeling in this situation. It was disheartening that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who were the wife and daughter of the deceased, seemed to have no intention of paying their respects. I, at least, wanted to create a friendly atmosphere where the relatives who had gathered to remember my father-in-law could share their memories. Apart from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's discourtesy, the 30-minute service proceeded smoothly. I left my seat first to prepare for the post-service meal in the next room. I escorted the relatives who had come, saying, "Please, this way." On the table, there were catered food, alcohol, soft drink, and more that I had prepared since early morning. My husband and I joined the relatives at the table, and everyone helped themselves to the food and enjoyed the meal. However, the respite was short-lived. My sister-in-law, who had deliberately taken a seat next to me, began to insult me loudly as she always did. "Oh, my! I can't believe that Hendrix married such an ugly woman. I never, ever imagined this." She criticized me, claiming that my husband could have easily married a more beautiful woman, and that his ex-girlfriend from his school days was stunning. She even turned to the relatives who were there and asked for their agreement. Those who were asked were at a loss for words. It might be because of the alcohol, but she said even more malicious things this time. "I hate that. Such an ugly woman stole my brother from me." My mother-in-law, who was sitting across from me, laughed heartily and said, "Haha, Bianca, you're being a bit too honest." I couldn't help but feel emotionally affected by it. My husband, seeing me fall silent and distressed, looked at his mother and sister and shouted at them. "Enough already! What are you saying in front of everyone?" but they just shrugged it off with comments like, "Come on, we're just telling the truth." Exactly. We're not lying, are we? If you don't like what we're saying, find yourself a prettier wife. They both just laughed, saying that it was an alcohol-induced joke, and that he had no right to complain, because they were making the place lively. Some of the relatives looked at them disapprovingly, telling them not to talk nonsense at a memorial service for the deceased. My husband probably didn't want to show family disputes. That would disrupt the atmosphere, especially in front of the relatives. He whispered in my ear, "I'm sorry, don't worry about it," and ignore them. Chose not to warn them, and just ignored them. Still, they kept insulting me, and the degree of their slander increased more and more. Even I, trying to maintain a polite smile, started to find it tiresome. If I could, I would have gotten out of there and gone home. But if I left at this point, it would undoubtedly ruin the atmosphere. I told myself that I should endure a little longer. In my mind, I whispered, "Hang in there, me." Then, my grandmother-in-law, who I thought wasn't listening to the conversation since she didn't say anything until now, intervened with a calm voice. "Who are you talking to?" All the people there turned their attention to my grandmother-in-law, who was sitting next to my mother-in-law with a surprised expression on their faces. My grandmother-in-law, who is always expressionless, looked stern. I think it was the first time I heard her speak. I was sure that she was quite angry because her daughter-in-law and granddaughter were about to ruin her own son's memorial service. Everyone there may have felt that way. The room fell silent for a moment when my grandmother-in-law spoke. My husband was confused by her behavior and asked her if he was being scolded for shouting at his own parent. I shouted, "Because they've treated Azalea so terribly." When he said that, she replied, "That's not it." She turned towards my mother-in-law and sister-in-law and said, "I was talking to you." She told them that there is not a single thing that my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who did nothing for my father-in-law's memorial service, can say. She seemed to have been watching me, who had never met my father-in-law, nor was related to him by blood, diligently preparing for his memorial service by myself. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law were furious with their faces turning red. "You can't be serious! Grandma, isn't that too harsh? I just told the truth." "Exactly. Besides, she's our eldest son's wife. Taking care of the matters of her husband's family is just expected, isn't it?" They snapped back at my grandmother-in-law. "You're my daughter-in-law. And you're the wife of the deceased. Bianca, you have an ugly heart. How can you say such cruel words?" Hearing the truth, they couldn't say anything anymore. Since I never thought that my grandmother-in-law would defend me, I was surprised, to be honest. We had never exchanged a word up until now. My grandmother-in-law started speaking quietly while the room was still silent, saying that it was a good opportunity. She explained that my mother-in-law's peculiar character hadn't changed at all since she married into the family, which naturally caused friction with her. Furthermore, her granddaughter, my sister-in-law, resembled my mother-in-law. That's why she had only maintained the bare minimum of interaction with these two. In contrast, my husband is gentle and considerate, just like his father. Since my father-in-law married my mother-in-law, who is older than him, and she had him wrapped around her finger, my grandmother-in-law had apparently worried that my husband might go through the same thing when he married me, who is older than him. That's why she had treated me in the way she had treated my mother-in-law and sister-in-law in the beginning. As time went by, she realized that I was a hardworking and kind daughter-in-law, which was contrary to her expectations. She told me that she had been very happy that she had a very nice granddaughter-in-law these days. As I was sharing the happiness with my husband, after receiving praise from my grandmother-in-law and realizing that my efforts had been recognized, we were met with glaring stares from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. My grandmother-in-law, noticing this, warned them, "It's absolutely unacceptable to mock and insult when you should be thankful." She said that a person who claims to be a straightforward person, but actually an insensitive person and doesn't think about other people's feeling, shouldn't act like this. She said to my sister-in-law, who is still glaring at me, "Bianca, you should learn from Azalea." She scolded Bianca, insisting that ridiculing a sister-in-law like me, who is younger but serves without a single complaint, is a foolish thing to do. All the relatives who were there agreed with my grandmother-in-law's words. They had actually felt sorry for me, but chosen not to offer words of sympathy, fearing that they might bully me even more if they did. Everyone said that they were on my side. My sister-in-law and mother-in-law, who had received criticism from all the relatives gathered, shivered with fear, turned pale, and quickly left. After they left, my grandmother-in-law turned to me and said, "The tea you served had a lot of warmth and was delicious." It was the first time she had spoken to me and smiled at me. She turned to my husband and said, "Even though your father failed, you found a wonderful wife. You two should live happily and cherish each other." These words brought tears of joy to my eyes and my husband's. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law haven't come back to my in-laws' house since the day of the memorial service. They apparently took refuge at my mother-in-law's parents' home. On that evening, my mother-in-law called my grandmother-in-law, complaining how my grandmother-in-law humiliated her. "If you apologize, I can come back." But it seems she coldly rejected her. "I have nothing to apologize for, and I don't want you to ever come back." Hearing this, my husband and I discussed and decided to reallocate the savings we had accumulated for our future home into funds for renovation. A few days later, we went to my in-laws' house together and told my grandmother-in-law that we want to live with her. She was thrilled and told us that we could move in any time. We quickly packed our belongings and moved in the following week. We decided to gradually renovate the dilapidated parts of the house. Of course, we will accommodate the requests from my grandmother-in-law who lives with us. Afterward, my mother-in-law's parents yelled at my mother-in-law and sister-in-law since they had stayed there too long, and kicked them out of the house with literally nothing on them. It was to be expected. It must have been a major inconvenience for them since my mother-in-law and sister-in-law overstayed their welcome, especially when my mother-in-law didn't work, and my sister-in-law didn't contribute much to the household finances. They are now living in a run-down apartment. It seems that they had struggled making ends meet with only my sister-in-law's salary. So, my mother-in-law started working, but she is having a hard time keeping a job due to her personality issues. They were not stable financially nor mentally. I heard that they are both irritable and are often arguing. On the other hand, since we moved to my in-laws' house, my husband's commute has become longer, but we're living peacefully with my grandmother-in-law. Currently, the biggest dream and goal for us as a couple is for my grandmother-in-law to hold our child while she's still healthy. I decided to work again until that day comes, and I got a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. This time, we are going to save money for our future child's education. When I finish work today, I think I'll make some delicious tea for my grandmother-in-law.